Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment, PPRA. Wait, hold on one second. We got another one in here. Utah FERPA. We're going to talk about two laws that protect student privacy by limiting what sensitive information a school can collect from students. The first one, the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment, or PPRA, is a federal law. The second one, Utah FERPA, which builds upon certain requirements of PPRA, is a state law. Both laws require LAs to have policies that relate to providing notice to parents of certain data collections, getting consent from parents for those data collections, and allowing parents to inspect and review materials and surveys that will be administered to the student. PPRA requires that these policies be developed in consultation with parents. Speaking of parents, let's focus on their notification rights. Notice and opt-in consent is generally required for protected information surveys. Note, the exact method doesn't have to be a survey. It could be a psychological or psychiatric test, exam, or treatment, an analysis, or an evaluation, regardless of the method used. The main question you need to answer is if the evident intended effect is to have the student reveal any of the following information about themselves or a family member. Political affiliations or beliefs, mental or psychological problems, sex behavior, orientation, or attitudes, illegal, antisocial, demeaning, or self-incriminating behavior, critical appraisals of others with whom students have close family relationships, whether they're a Capulet, a Montague, or goes by any other name, legally recognized privileged relationships, such as those with lawyers, doctors, or ministers, religious affiliations, practices, or beliefs. So look, you can ask him if he's a merchant, you can ask him if he's from Venice, but you can't ask him his religion. Prick him, and does he not bleed? Or income, except as required by law to determine program eligibility. Note that it doesn't matter if the survey is anonymous or personally identifiable. If the evident intended effect is to have them reveal this information, then the requirement is triggered. Now, the term evident intended effect is important. It wouldn't apply to a teacher discussing any of these topics as part of the curriculum. It also wouldn't apply if the student decided to spontaneously share any of the protected information. Also note that parents will have the right to inspect and review any materials related to the protected information survey. And this includes instructional materials used as part of the curriculum. Utah law specifies that you need to provide the URL of the survey so that the parent can go online and inspect it. There are some important exceptions to the opt-in consent rule. In these cases, prior notice and the opportunity to opt out are all that's required. Protected information survey is part of a suicide prevention program as described in this state code, or if the protected information survey is administered by USBE, for any non-emergency physically invasive exam required as a condition of attendance. Note that you're probably never going to trigger this requirement. Hearing, vision, scoliosis screenings, or any screening permitted or required by Utah law is fine. You also have to provide notice anytime the data collected in a survey will be marketed or sold by a third party. It's also called a marketing survey. Once you have your policies, you need to provide notice to parents. This notice of their rights should be provided to parents annually. We have a model document that you can use to meet the requirements of PPRA. Now, if you're not going to give any notice that triggers PPRA, this will be the only notice you need to give. What you should do then is at the beginning of the year, notify parents of any surveys you're aware of. If other surveys come up throughout the year, you can notify them of it then. Note that PPRA requires that this notice be given directly to parents. This could be handing it to them, mailing it to them, or using email. Utah law specifies that this notice needs to be given at least 2 weeks before the protected information survey is administered. If you're in a rush and can't wait that long, parents can waive the 2-week requirement. For the consent to be considered valid, your notice must contain the following information: the information you're going to collect, the purpose of the collection, the means by which the records will be obtained, examined, and reviewed, the individuals that will have access to the information after it's collected, and finally, the method by which the parent or student may be granted access to inspect and review the information collected. One general exception to all of this is any situation in which you reasonably believe that there is a threat to the well-being of the student or others. In this case, you must notify the parent or law enforcement without delay. In cases of potential child abuse, you would report to the Division of Child and Family Services, DCFS, and they'd be the ones who would notify the parents. But remember, in all these situations, even though you'll be able to ask about protected information, You want your interventions to be as minimal as possible to protect the student's safety. Utah law further specifies that you need to provide in-service to teachers and administrators regarding this law. The exact frequency and content of the training is up to you. We've already created a video on Utah FERPA, which you're welcome to use. Now, what happens if we don't follow these laws? PPRA is a federal law, and it's enforced by the U.S. Department of Education, very similar to FERPA. So parents can file a complaint with the Student Privacy Policy Office. Teachers that violate your PPRA policy may also be subject to UPAC or other local discipline. In summary, the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment and Utah FERPA were both created to provide a level of privacy protection for students and their families. In order to do this, you'll need to focus on 3 key points. Make sure your LEA policies are up to date. Notify parents annually, and train educators as frequently as needed. Or to sum it as the Bard might, all the world is a stage, and all the men and women, merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his life plays many parts. Some of those parts, the academic ones, you're going to need to know a lot about. But those personal ones, you might need to get parental consent first.